Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So we were looking at the first property of an ism, which is the status. Now we move on to the next chapter, which discusses a subtopic of the status, which is called flexibility. So it's not a property of an ism, it's only a subtopic. So the flexibility which will be discussed is connected to ending sounds. It's not connected to ending combinations. So ending sounds, just as a reminder, is determined by the last harakat, or the harakat on the last letter of the word or the ism, whereas the ending combination is when extra letters are added at the end of the word. So this flexibility, which will be discussed in this chapter, is only connected to ending sounds. So if we look at the masculine chart and the feminine chart here, just to go through it quickly, you on the right side for the masculine chart you have the status, which is the rafa, nasab and jar. On the left side you've got the word mu'minun, which means a believer. So mu'minun is the rafa, mu'minan, which is the fatatain, is the nasab, and mu'minin, which is the kasratain, the two kasras, is the jar. And the feminine chart you have mu'minatun, mu'minatan and mu'minatin. So there's three types of flexibility. So you have fully flexible, you have non-flexible, and you have partly flexible. So if we start with fully flexible, which is called munsarifun or mu'rabun. So this is the default status of isms, is fully flexible. Unless there's a reason to make something non-flexible or partly flexible, we will assume that it's fully flexible. So a single ism has three different endings or appearances, meaning the way you see it, for three different statuses, which is the table below. So this is a fully flexible ism, mu'minun. And so in each case, in rafa, nasab and jar, the appearance of the ending of the word, so if you look at the last letter, the noon, is different in each case. So in the case of rafa, you see a dhamma or dhammatain, and in the case of nasab you see a fatatain, and in the case of jar you see kasratain. So in each case, rafa, nasab, jar, the ending sound, the ending harakat is different in each cases, and that's a fully flexible ism. But a non-flexible ism, which is called mabniun, they do not show their status in all three appearances. So meaning in all three statuses they appear the same, the ism appears the same, which I'll show examples in the table below. But words ending in alif maksura or an alif are non-flexible. So when we see any type of ism that ends with a alif maksura or an alif, then that is a non-flexible word. So an example, there's two examples here. The first is Isa alayhi salam, the name Isa, and the second is mata, which means when. It's a question word. So in all three statuses, you can see in both of these words, mata and Isa, there's an alif maksura at the end. So that gives it away that it's non-flexible. So in all three statuses, in rafa, nasab and jar, the word looks the same. So if we look at the first table, you can see in rafa, it's Isa. In nasab, it's still Isa. And in jar, it's still Isa. So in all cases, rafa, nasab and jar, it looks the same. The non-flexible version looks the same. And same thing with mata. So in rafa, it's mata. Nasab, it's still mata. Jar, it's still mata. And how to determine the status of a non-flexible ism is something which we'll discuss later. Because obviously we have to work out that if we have a non-flexible ism like mata, is it rafa, is it nasab, is it jar? Because you can't tell just by looking at it, because they all look the same. So there's ways of determining that, and we'll discuss that later inshallah. So partly flexible, which is called mamnu'un min as-sarfi, its status is shown in two appearances only. So meaning not three appearances like fully flexible. So it only shows a Dhamma or it shows a Fatha. It never shows Tanween as they are light. So meaning partly flexible words are light. So they're not heavy. So if you remember from the last chapter, heavy always has a double Tanween. So a double Dhamma, double Kasra, or double Dhamma, a double Fatha. But whereas when we want to make something light in ending sounds, we get rid of the double harakat and we make it a single harakat to make it light. And so partly flexible, you have to remember that they're light. These words are light, so you won't see them in heavy state. They'll always light. And the two appearances is Dhamma or Fatha. So if we look at an example here in this table, the word or the name Ibrahim is actually a partly flexible word or ism. So in the Rafa status, you have Ibrahimu, so that has a Dhamma at the end. And like I said, it's not Dhammatain, otherwise it would be heavy. So it's a single Dhamma, which makes the word light, because partly flexible isms are light. So that's why it's only a single Dhamma on it. So Ibrahim, in Rafa status, you can see the Dhamma. But in the Nasab and in the Jar status, both the ending sound has a Fatha on it in both cases. So in Nasab it'd be Ibrahima, and in Jar status it'd still be Ibrahima. And which has been highlighted in blue. And again, differentiating between the Nasab and the Jar status will be discussed later. So how to tell the difference, whether, if we're looking at Ibrahima, whether that's Nasab or whether it's Jar. That's something we will discuss later, inshallah. So two ways to turn partly flexible isms into a fully flexible ism. The first way is by adding an al on it, which means the. So example, if you had the word Thamudu, which is a partly flexible word, it's a proper name of a place, Thamudu. So it's partly flexible, but it can become fully flexible when you put al on it. So if we say al Thamudu, then it becomes fully flexible. So as an example, what I mean is like Thamudu by itself is partly flexible. So in Rafa, it's Thamudu with the Dhamma. In Nasab, it will be Thamuda with the Fatha. And in Jar, it will also be Thamuda with the Fatha, just like Ibrahim. So you see that in Rafa, it's Dhamma. In Nasab and Jar, it will be Fatha. But if you put Al on it, then the Rafa would be Al Thamudu, the Nasab would be Al Thamuda, and the Jar would be Al Thamudi. Just like a fully flexible, because it becomes a fully flexible ism. So you can see in each case, Rafa, Jar and status has a different ending sound in a fully flexible ism. And so that's the first way of making a partly flexible word into a fully flexible word, by putting al on it. And the second way is by making the ism a mudaf. And this is something that we'll discuss later. What a mudaf is. And so the next is some groups of partly flexible words. So just as a reminder, the partly flexible, it only shows two appearances. So meaning in Rafa, you see the Dhamma, but in Jar and Nasab, you just see the Fatha. So it's partly flexible and they're light. So they don't appear heavy. So some groups of partly flexible words. So you have non-Arabic names. That's why Ibrahim is partly flexible, because Ibrahim is not an Arabic name. Ibrahim obviously was named way before Makkah was established or Saudi Arabia was established, so it's a non-Arabic name, whereas Arabic names are fully flexible. That's why the name Muhammadun sallallahu alaihi wasallam is fully flexible, because it's an Arab name. And there's 4 Arab prophets in the Quran that are mentioned. So Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Hud alayhi salam, Salih alayhi salam, and Shuaib alayhi salam. So that's why all 4 of them are heavy, because they're Arab names. Whereas non-Arabic names are always partly flexible, so they're light. They appear light. And feminine names and unique masculine names are also partly flexible words. And proper names of places, which we discussed before. Thamud was an example of that. So proper names of places are also partly flexible words. So we just briefly go through them. So the non-Arabic names. So Arabic names are fully flexible, but non-Arabic Arab names are partly flexible. The only exception to this rule is if the word is, or the name is 3 letters and it has a sukoon in the middle. So if it's 3 letters with a sukoon in the middle, then it's always considered fully flexible, even if it's a non-Arab name like Lut. So Lut alayhi salam, or the name Lut, is actually a non-Arabic name, but it's considered fully flexible because it's got 3 letters and there's a sukoon in the middle. That's why. And the examples would be here, like for example, Suleimanu is actually a non-Arabic name. So because it's partly flexible, we can see in the table that in the Rafa status is Suleimanu, so it's got a Dhamma on it. And in the Nasab and Jar status is Suleimana, which has got Fatah in it, in both cases, Nasab and Jar, because it's partly flexible. And because it's partly flexible, it's therefore light, so you'll never have a tanween on it. You'll never have a double dammatain or fatatain. But whereas an Arabic name is fully flexible, so we use the example of the Prophet ﷺ. So Muhammadun, the double dammatain is the rafa, and Muhammadan would be the nasab, the fatatain, and the Muhammadin would be the kasratain, which is in jar, because it's fully flexible. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Whereas another example which we mentioned before, a non-Arabic name, but it's still fully flexible because it's got 3 letters. It's made up of 3 letters with the sukoon in the middle, which is Lut. So Rafa would be Lutun because it's fully flexible, so it takes a damatain. Lutan would be the nasab, which is fatatain, and Lutin, which is kasratain, is the jar. And a feminine, which is the second one we said, feminine names and unique masculine names are partly flexible. So all feminine names are partly flexible. Unique masculine names, they have no female counterpart. They are also partly flexible. The exception, again, same exception as before, 3-letter name with a sukoon in the middle will always be fully flexible, even if it is female or unique masculine name. So here we have Hafsa, the feminine name Hafsatu. So because it's a feminine name, it's going to be partly flexible. So Hafsatu with the Dhamma, the single Dhamma, because it's partly flexible, it's light. So that's Rafa. And the Nasab will be Hafsata, and the Jar will be Hafsata, both of them taking a Fatah. And a unique masculine name is actually Umar. There's a unique masculine name, so it's actually therefore partly flexible, and it's light, so it can't be heavy. So the Rafa would be Umaru. The Nasab and Jar, both of them will be Umara, and it takes a Fatah. And the last examples we said of partly flexible words is a proper names of places. Proper means that it's something that's specific, it's not common. So if we said a garden, that's common. If we say the garden, that's something that's proper. It's because you're talking about something specific. So if it has al on it, then it's fully flexible, which we discussed before. That when we discussed the example of Thamud, that if you put al on it, then automatically a partly flexible word becomes fully flexible. The exception again in proper names of places is that if it has, same as before, that if it has it's a 3-letter word with a sukoon in the middle, then it's fully flexible. So the example which we mentioned earlier with Thamud, so the Rafa would be Thamudu because it's partly flexible, therefore it is light, it can't take a Dhammatain. So it's single Dhamma. Thamudu is Rafa, and Nasab and Jar is Thamuda, so it takes a Fatah. Whereas the name of a place with an al on it becomes fully flexible. So remember we said before, partly flexible. If you want to make it fully flexible, just put an al on it. So here we have Iraq, but we said al-Iraq. So Rafa, because we put al on it, it becomes a fully flexible word. In all 3 statuses, the ending sound will be different, which is typical of a fully flexible word. So al-Iraqu is the Rafa, which is the Dhamma, and al-Iraqa is the Nasab, and al-Iraqi is the Jar. And bear in mind from the last chapter that when you have al, you can never have a tanween with al. So you will never say al-Iraqun. That's not correct. It's always, if you have al, then it has to have a single harakat at the end. It can't have a double. So we have some questions, and the questions is, these words in this table, are they fully flexible, partly flexible, or non-flexible, and give the reason why. Give the reason why. And the last harakat has been removed from each ism. Otherwise, you might be able to figure out from that what it is. So we've removed the last harakat in each case to make it a little bit harder. So have a go at this. Decide whether each word is fully flexible, partly flexible, or non-flexible, and give the reason why. And the answers are right below, so you can check if you're correct or not. And again, when we reach the end of a chapter, we always urge that go through the vocabulary list chapter at the end of this book, and this should ideally be at the end of every session. This should be reviewed at the end of every session. Whenever this curriculum is studied, the vocabulary list should be reviewed.